All right, Peter. This is a unique episode of Really No Really. But this,
by the way, what I love is
yeah,
you didn't have the balls to really hit the bell. You muffled it a little
You're going
bit,
to see why in a second.
Okay,
you're going to see why.
Go ahead.
What? Now, this is not to annoy you. This is thematic for what we're going to discuss today. And you tell me what the theme is. Ready?
Oh, I'm going to kill you. Near-death experience. What?
You get it? Do you get it yet?
Is this Morse code? What could I be getting?
For whom
the bell
tolls. Because that bell, one day, will ring, the final bell. For you, for me, probably you first. You know, I'm just saying. I'm looking at you, I'm looking at me. I think you're going first.
What is it that you're looking at me that you think I will go first? What?
First of all, you are a few years older than I.
But I'm relatively healthy. I don't smoke. I don't drink.
The key word in that sentence was relatively. And not comparatively. Comparatively to me, there's nothing wrong with me. I have zero plaque, zero cardiac plaque. My liver is clean. My kidneys are clean. My lungs are clean.
Smash cut to.
My brain is fine. What's your name again?
Smash cut to. George Costanza was killed in a traffic accident today.
Well, anything.
La Brea.
That is act of God. I'm saying if God stays out of it.
But by the way, this episode is about that. This is about what happens when we die. Is there a God? Is there a greater source? Where do we go?
Right.
And you said to me, because I find guests for the show often, and you said...
No, you find guests for the show exclusively.
Okay, well, no, because our team...
I don't want anybody to think I'm lifting a finger for this
No, you're not. Which is why you live longer.
That's right. But I don't aggravate over
You
this
said,
thing.
I'd love to have somebody who died and came back. This is about as close as you can get. Sebastian Junger went. He's going to tell his story.
Yeah, and this is a guy. I actually, when you said his name, I went, the guy from Perfect Storm, the guy who wrote
it.
Yeah, he's a investigative journalist. He's been embedded in a lot of war zones. This is a guy who lives it out and hangs it out there a lot.
Yeah, puts it out there. But he had an experience. We'll let him tell about it. That he wrote about in his latest book about what happened and what he saw. People talk about the white light.
Right.
They talk about a tunnel.
Sure.
People have talked about. I saw a family member reaching out for me.
Yeah.
His story.
That would make me not go.
Depending on the family member.
If my mother's there going, sweetheart, I'm not going.
So she could be stealing silverware.
That's right.
In the afterlife.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we wanted to hear Sebastian's story because everybody's fascinated. We're all going there, like you said.
Yeah.
What can we expect? What do you expect
Right.
to happen at that moment in time?
Really? No, really. Really? No, really. Really?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome journalist, author, and a man with a unique experience.
Number one New York Times best-selling author. Books like The Perfect Storm.
I didn't mean to poo-poo.
A Death in Belmont, War, Tribe, Freedom, and his latest, In My Time of Dying, How I Came Face to Face with the Idea of an Afterlife.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sebastian Junger.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Nice that you're still with us in the flesh and spirit. Because we know, Peter has filled me in on this incredible story that you have. I know you, of course, from your investigative journalism and literary work. But when Peter started to tell me your story about this near-death experience, my head started to spin. I got very excited, and so I'm thrilled you're here to share it with us.
Yeah, my book is called In My Time of Dying, and it's about how I almost died and what I saw when I was dying. And I just start out by saying I'm an atheist, I'm a rationalist. My father was a physicist and was an atheist until he died some years ago. And that's the proper context for what I'm about to tell you, which is that I was a war reporter for a long time. I had a number of close calls with bullets and bombs and things like that. Very close calls. I was blown up by an IED in Afghanistan. I had a guy tell me that he was going to execute me in the Niger Delta. I was seized by rebels and accused of being a spy. I had all kinds of stuff. But I got out of that amazing and terrifying life after my buddy Tim Hetherington was killed in Libya, covering the civil war in Libya. Of course, Tim and I made the documentary Restrepo together about a remote combat outpost in eastern Afghanistan. And he was killed a few years later, and I got out of the business. I got married. I had children, a wonderful family, 2 little girls. And during COVID, we left New York City, where we live in the tiny apartment. We left for a house in a very secluded place in the woods in Massachusetts. It's so remote that there's no cell phone service. It's the end of a dead-end dirt road. The landline doesn't work when it rains because the line's short out. In other words, it's paradise, right? And, one day, I was talking to my wife, and I felt this pain shoot through my abdomen. Not unbearable, but it really straightened me up. Like, oh, what was that? And I'm not a walking heart attack. I'm a really healthy, athletic guy, and I just never think in terms of medical crisis, right? Like it's never crossed my mind.
Right.
And I tried to stand up to work the pain out, and I almost fell over. I couldn't keep my feet. My blood pressure was plummeting. I mean, this is how casually we die. One moment I'm talking to my wife, the next moment I'm dying.
Wow.
Without any preamble or precursor or anything. I had an undiagnosed aneurysm in my pancreatic artery, and which is a little artery in your abdomen. And aneurysms are an unnatural sort of ballooning in the artery wall. It's not a product of poor health or anything like that. It's a sort of freak thing. And my aneurysm chose that moment to rupture, and I started losing a pint of blood every maybe 10 or 15 minutes into my own abdomen.
Wow.
And, there's about 10 pints of blood in the human body. You can lose maybe half of that before you die. And we lived an hour away from the nearest hospital. So I was literally a human hourglass. Fortunately, I didn't know that. I had no idea I was dying. And we managed to call an ambulance, and they got there, and it took about an hour and a half to get me to the hospital. And when I got there, I was in end-stage hemorrhagic shock. I was convulsing. I was maybe 10 minutes from dead. And suddenly there was a guy with a huge needle telling me he was going to put it through my neck into my jugular to transfuse me. And that was when I had my vision.
Now, were you in pain at that point? And when you get stuck with a needle like that, does that hurt? Are you lucid?
That's
are you
your
able
question?
to talk and communicate?
Did the needle hurt?
Well, I just want to know at that moment what he thought. Was he aware that he was that close?
Wow.
No.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Sebastian. Tell him if the needle hurt.
No, it's a good question, because the needle was it was a big, intimidating needle, and it was going into my neck, and I didn't like the idea of it. And I actually asked the doctor. I said, "You mean in case there's an emergency?" And he said, "This is the emergency right now." So I said, "Okay, do what you got to do, whatever." Like, I don't know why I'm in for belly pain, but if you feel like you need to stick a needle in my neck, go ahead.
Yeah.
And so they put some lidocaine on your neck, and so that actually didn't feel like anything. I was in tremendous pain because the blood in your abdomen against your organs is incredibly provocative to your organs. And I was really sort of in agony from that. And I was convulsing. I was deep in hypothermia from blood loss and sort of not of right mind. And but I was conscious and conversant with the doctors. And
Wow.
and I had no idea that I was dying, no idea what was going on. And as he started working on my neck, prepping my neck for the needle, all of a sudden this black pit opened up underneath me, this black hole that sort of had infinity on the other side of it. It was like a very infinitely dark abyss. And I was getting pulled in through this hole. And I was terrified of it. I didn't know I was dying, but I was terrified of going into the hole. It was like I was a wounded coyote or something. I was all animal instincts, like, don't go into the black pit. And as I started to panic, suddenly I realized that my father, who'd been dead many years, my father was above me in this sort of energy form right above me. And he was communicating with me, and he was communicating, basically, it's okay. You don't have to fight it. You can come with me. I'll take care of you. And I was horrified. I mean, I didn't know I was dying. So the invitation to go with him I was almost insulted. I was like, look, you're dead. I'm just in belly pain. Like, the party's over here. I'm not going with you. Like, Dad, what are you doing here anyway? Like, floating above me. Like, what? And I said to the doctor, you got to hurry. You're losing me right now. I'm going. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going. And then that was when he started pushing blood into my jugular, and they brought me back from the brink and kept me alive long enough for the next 6 hours, kept me alive long enough to save my life in the interventional radiology suite, where they managed to embolize the leak, plug the leak by catheter.
Before we move on to your dad beckoning you to the other side, could you explain how they found where the aneurysm was?
Well, it's complicated, but they do a CAT scan, and they can also do an angiogram where they inject radioactive dye into your bloodstream, and then they can look at it in a fluoroscope, which is basically real-time X-ray, like X-ray video, basically. And they can see where the blood is sort of flowing out of your vascular system. They can sort of figure out where that is. It took them a long time. And I was on the fluoroscope. They also use the fluoroscope to guide the catheter. They punch a little hole in your right groin. They insert a catheter in your femoral artery, and they slide it up through your vascular system. And they have all these different heads on it. And they can turn corners. They can double back. They can do crazy stuff. And they gradually push this thing through your vasculature. And they eventually got it to my pancreatic artery. It took them hours to do it. It was very, very difficult. So they used the fluoroscope to guide that as well. I was in the fluoroscope for so long that I ended up getting radiation burns on my back, and which appeared a couple of weeks later. And I had a rectangular sunburn on my back where the plate was on the machine. And my wife, of course, who was enormously freaked out by all this.
Yeah.
The whole time that I was in the hospital, she knew I might die. I didn't know that, but she did. It was very traumatic to her. So at any rate, when the radiation burn appeared, I tried to make light of it, make her laugh. And it's an unfortunate instinct that many husbands have, is like, when in doubt, try to make your wife laugh.
Right, sure.
It's not always the best choice, right? So I said, don't worry, honey, we can call it Square Noble. And she didn't appreciate.
Were you conscious during this whole procedure as they were twisting this thing through? Consciously. See, I would have checked out on, we're going to punch a hole in your groin. And that's when I would have said, hey, Propofol's a great thing. Why not?
I have memories of the whole thing. They had me on a little bit of Versed and a little bit of fentanyl, but I have memories from the whole thing. And I remember being in extraordinary pain. When they inserted the catheter into my femoral, again, they use lidocaine on your skin, and they make a little cut. And arteries don't have nerves, and veins don't have nerves, and so once they're inside the skin barrier, they can sort of do what they want, and it doesn't feel like anything.
No, to me, it's psychological. It's just knowing that
they're doing it,
that I'm in that kind of shape, that they're having to do this, and then the idea of, I'm one of those guys where I've never needed a major surgery. But I know friends of mine who they have the pre-procedure consultation, and the doctor says, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go in through your thing and going to jump around, and we're going to take this out and cut this and move this over. And I always go, I don't want to know. Here's what I need to know. What am I going to see and what am I going to feel when I wake up? That's all I need to know, so I'm ready for that. And then do your thing. I don't need,
you don't want to know.
I don't tell you how I perform. You don't need to know what I did to get on stage.
Put me out.
Put me the hell out.
Sebastian, what happened to all the blood that was accumulated inside your body? Did they put a funnel in there, like an oil funnel, and just drain it out? What do they do?
It gradually gets absorbed, reabsorbed into your body. It's called a hematoma. And, I could feel it in my abdomen. My abdomen was distended and sort of discolored. And, I had 5 or 6 units of blood sloshing around in my abdomen. And that's what was causing so much pain. They couldn't sedate me more than they did because my vital signs were so low. My blood pressure was 60/40. which is running on fumes. You know, I needed 10 units of blood in the end. So they really can't just knock you out because they're putting your life at risk if they do that.
Sure.
And so I just sort of sucked it up. And I didn't know, they didn't explain anything. The doctors were these masked strangers who just got to work. They're not very talkative. I mean, in the middle of, they were trying to save my life, and they're not very talkative. The nurse was very sweet, and she kept holding my hand and telling me to breathe with her because I was in pain. And she was leading me through, I think, basically Lamaze breathing that women in labor use, and it actually helped. I was really surprised. I had the thought in the moment, wow, this is probably what they do with women in the delivery room, and my God, it works. Like, it actually helped my pain.
Wow.
All right, so let's go.
Let's go to the
Let's
afterlife.
go to the pit. Yeah.
So
Were you? Here's my question: were you in dialogue with your father? And if so, was it actual verbal? Could the physicians hear you speaking?
Right. Well, there's a lot of. There are many, many, many accounts of dying people seeing the dead in the room, right? People in hospice, older people in hospice, people dying of cancer, things like that. And often they'll even speak with them, right? Of course, no one sees the dead and no one hears anything said back, but it's an extremely common thing. And no one else really sees the dead except the dying. And I was dying. And of course, no one else saw what I saw. I saw my father hovering above me in this sort of like energy form. And the communication, I wouldn't say was verbal. Again, I sort of sensed him in a non-visual way that was extremely real, right? It was as real as vision, except it wasn't vision quite. It was I don't think there's words in English for it. And likewise, the communication, it was almost like we were telepathic with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think? Because most cultures have the same description. Doesn't matter. You go globally, anywhere, for history, where they're talking to an elder, somebody who passed, that's beckoning them to come. As an atheist, did you change your belief system as far as what may be on the other side, or what had you gone with Dad? What would have happened?
Well, okay, so yeah, it's worth it to sort of break down the vocabulary here a little bit. So atheism means that I don't believe in God. I don't claim to know there is none. Claiming to know there's no God is as absurd as claiming to know that there is a God, right? I mean, both are indefensible positions, and I mean indefensible with data or evidence,
right?
And so but I do not myself believe in God because I've never felt his presence or have seen any evidence that there is one, right? So, but that's different than a quote afterlife. So the idea that there's a post-death continuation of the individual on some level, maybe even a subatomic sort of quantum level, that's entirely possible in a universe that has no God, no creator in it.
Mm-hmm.
You could also have a creator God. I don't think there is one, but just logically speaking, you could have a creator God who created this universe and decided to create biological beings like salamanders and turtles and sharks and humans and mosquitoes and everything else. And when these things die, they're biologically dead. They decompose. They're dead. There's no soul. That's it. There's no quote afterlife. So God in an afterlife, you don't need one or the other. You could have both. You could have neither, or you have one or the other. Neither requires the other.
Right.
And so what I would say, in my book, In My Time of Dying, is divided into two sections. It's divided into what and if. What is what happened to me? What if? I mean, the if section is basically what if there were some form of post-death existence. How would that work according to the science that we now understand? And I sort of run through NDEs, near-death experiences, are very, very common. They're generally very, very similar in form across societies, between individuals. There are dying people who saw a dead person come to get them like my dad did. And it was a person who had just died, and the dying person didn't even know that they were dead. Right? Sort of, Joe, what are you doing here? Right? Like, I thought you were in Florida with Mary. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, so it actually is quite mysterious, and I'll just leave it at that. But where I wound up was, there's a lot of reason to dismiss the NDE experiences as basically hallucinations, the sort of like spasms of a dying brain, right? Except for one thing, and that is that we know, say, if you give a room full of people LSD, they'll all hallucinate. We know that. You can stress the human brain, you give it hallucinogens, we will see things, right? But a room full of people will not all see the same thing.
Right.
And what's very, very strange about the dying is that they see the dead, and nearly nobody else does. And so that's the only thing that got me to think, wait a second, do we really understand anything about reality, about consciousness, about time, about life, about death? And there are some very plausible theories. I mean, by plausible, I mean worth discussing, that consciousness is universal, that the universe is suffused with consciousness, that our individual consciousness is a small expression of that universal consciousness, and that when we die, we go back to the Colossus, as it were. There's a unity of all things. And, there are some very, very serious people like Erwin Schrödinger, the physicist, and other physicists who are sort of ascribed to that idea. It's called panpsychism, ascribed to that idea of a universal consciousness. So, again, I don't assert anything because I can't prove anything, but it's a reasonable conversation.
Yeah, no kidding. And I'm wondering, as you talk about the fear basis that we live under, that if you're not good, you don't do certain things, you're not going to go to the right place. Jason and I were talking about heaven and hell and where do you want to go? There's such a big story that's told about do the right thing, and you wonder, are humans without that fear base? Would we act the right way? Do we need that? Do we need that story to get us behave in line, rather than if the story disappears and there's nothing we're going to, chaos would take over?
Well, I think if that were true, you would see a high rate of misbehavior in atheists, right? Like, nothing to fear, I'll do whatever I want. And you really don't see that. I mean, jails are filled with Christians, right? This atheism is probably correlated with a higher education, which is negatively correlated with religious belief. So I'm guessing there's actually a disproportionately fewer number of atheists in prison. I'm just guessing. I don't know. I'm just sort of guessing.
Yeah.
And clearly, human society has been running itself for hundreds of thousands of years before Christ was born and Christian morality came onto the scene. And Christian morality and all religious morality is born of universal human moral norms that are required to keep our little band of 40 or 50 proto-humans cohesive and together. So, there's certain things you can't do. You can't just stab your uncle because you're upset with him, right? You can't just take someone else's food, blah, blah, blah. These are all moral beliefs codified in religious thought, but
Right.
clearly humans have behaved morally for a very, very long time, because to do otherwise would get you banished or killed in your human community in
Right.
prehistoric times.
Yeah, human consequence. I want to go back for a moment because we glossed by it so quickly to where you're in this dialogue with your father. Now, in many of the near-death stories that I've heard, that moment for the person going through it becomes quite blissful and accepting. And in fact, it's the opposite of what you're describing, where the dead entity is saying, it's not your time. Don't come with me yet. Go back. In your case, it sounded like you went, hey, Daddy, leave me alone. I don't want to go with you right now. So, A, to the extent that you've researched it, was your experience unusual? And B, why do you think why do you think you knew that you did not want to go at that point? Was it just the natural fear of death, or was there something else in play?
I imagine death is a great consolation when you're very old, if you're in pain, if you're dying of cancer in great pain, if you're in great psychic pain. I imagine that death is a welcome finish line. that wasn't me, right? I had a 3-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old daughter, and my wife, and I've loved my life. It took me a long time to get to this point of having this amazing family, and I have no interest in going anywhere. And so I think that sort of partly plays into it. But I should say that I did. My heart never stopped. And the doctor said that the reason I survived this, he said, very, very few people would have even made it to the hospital alive with that much blood loss. I survived because I was an endurance athlete for much of my life. I'm a very strong, healthy, athletic person, and my heart just kept slugging away.
Wow.
And my heart didn't stop. Like I did not technically die. They didn't have to paddle me and bring me back. It's possible that had I actually died, the dialogue with my father would have turned. It would have changed in its tone to something more sort of welcome.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, it's so good to see you. But at where I was like, what do you? I mean, really, I was just puzzled. Like, what are you doing here? Like, I mean, I'm just in for belly pain. Like, I'm not dying. Like, get out of here. Like, there's been a huge misunderstanding, and of course, I was the one that didn't understand, right? But I didn't know that.
What's so interesting about that to me is given your background, I would have thought. I mean, I know you had many things to live for, your family certainly, but given your background and how you threw yourself into such dangerous situations, out of I'm sure a curiosity and a job to do and needing to cover this and needing that you would have found this a really interesting, curious moment to go, oh, I'm gonna go into sort of an unknown. Maybe I can report back on this. It's just it was I just find it interesting. I remember my sister. I'm just going to relate a quick story. My sister died about 7 years ago, just before her 65th birthday. She had been chronically ill for a while, but she was having a fairly good period, and literally her system became septic. Her gut ruptured internally. She was becoming septic, and she died within 24 hours. But as she was in ICU, intubated, with everything going on, she actually wrote to her doctor on a pad, "Am I dying?" And he wrote, "Well, yeah." And I wasn't there, but my understanding was that she had to wrestle for about 30 minutes with the idea that, because she was cognizant of the fact that there was nothing they could do, and that this was the direction she was going, and she had to take it all in, and I can't imagine that part of the transition, that part of the journey is just, that's why I note that moment for you of going, nope, I'm not interested I'm not going here right now. I'm not going.
And, children are a game changer, and I don't know how I would have reacted had I not had children. I would have been a very sad person. And I think sad people probably die more easily, accept death more easily.
Yeah.
And so had I not met my wife and had a family, et cetera, had I been sort of single in the world, or at least not a father, I might have welcomed, I was like, okay, that didn't work. I'm out of here. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, what resonated with me in your story in a big way, and Jason knows this, we were working on a show together, and I didn't know how sick I was. And I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and kept persevering and kind of denying it. And it got to the point where I was rushed emergency to the hospital. They had to do emergency surgery, cut me open from my sternum down to my gut. I had a stomach that was in the wrong place. It had kinked. And then they gave me a staph infection when they did the emergency surgery, and they told my wife, prepare for the worst, because he's not going to make it. So I wake up in intensive care, and I'm in intensive care for a month and a half. And the part of the story that resonates, your story, I get home from there, I make all kinds of deals. I'm going to get a boat, I want to do this. None of it happened. But all of the things I said I was going to do as the event. You
said you'd do a podcast.
That happened.
Of all the things,
and I'm sorry.
Delivered for you.
But as we got away from the event, of course, a lot of that changed. But the thing that blew me away, that you experienced too, it's months after. And I hear my wife talking to somebody, and she said, yeah, he was in really bad shape the entire time. And I said, yeah. Later I said, what do you mean the entire time? When I was in the hospital, I was okay. She said, you were in intensive care. I said, yeah, but I was okay after the surgery. She said, no. They keep you in intensive care because they were worried the entire time.
Yeah.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I know the same with you, that, wait a minute, it was that I could have died that whole time. I thought I was out of the woods. I never thought that was a thing. And I know that you felt the same. And I remember you saying to your wife, am I really here? That you were really tormented about where you were after all this experience, and how you got it right and how you got it wrong, and what's real or not.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm sorry you went through that, and that's terrifying. And a month and a half in the ICU just sounds like absolute living hell. I did a week, and it was like that. It's brutal. So my heart really goes out to you. That's a rough deal. One of the things that was quite complicated for me, and again, I'm a rationalist and an atheist and blah blah blah, all this stuff, right? The morning before I almost died, so 36 hours prior, in the sort of gray light of dawn, I was woken up by the most horrific dream I've ever had. And the dream was that I was hovering above my family, and they were crying, they were grieving me. And I was I was like, I'm right here. I was sort of waving my arms and shouting to them, and they couldn't hear me. And I was made to understand that I had died, and that I was a spirit, I was a ghost, and that there was no way to ever go back. And I was headed out, and this is it. And I was so anguished by this that it woke me up. And I woke up, and we co-sleep. We have a family bed. I woke up next to my older daughter. Just like, oh my God, thank God that was a dream, because I really thought I was dead. And I was in a state of sort of disbelief. No, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And then I woke up. I was like, oh, thank God. And 36 hours later, that's exactly what happened. And the dream that I had was also a classic NDE. One of the very, very common experiences or hallucinations, depending on what you think of them. But one of the most common is that you're hovering above your family, above the doctors, above your own body. You can't communicate with them, and you're headed out, right? And that was my dream. And I didn't know anything about NDEs. I had no interest in them. I thought the whole thing was kind of flaky to the extent that I had even heard about this stuff, right? And I had a classic NDE. And so when I woke up in the ICU, the nurse said, wow, congratulations, you almost died last night. In fact, no one can believe you're alive. And all of a sudden, when she said that, I mean, I had no idea, right? And I remember, I was like, oh my God, I saw my father. I saw the pit. Like, what was that? And then I got home after 5 days in the ICU and 2 days in the general floor. And I got home, and I started to get this terrible feeling that maybe I had died, that maybe I had died in my sleep, and that my dream was actually my experience of leaving life.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And this was all a dying hallucination that wasn't real, and that eventually I'm out of here. And my family are grieving somewhere, and I don't know it, and I can't reach them. And it's called derealization, where when you lose faith in reality and in the objective certainty of reality, and you doubt everything. And that's what happened to me. It's quite common. I didn't know that. It's a function of trauma. I was having a classic trauma reaction, but I didn't know it. And really, I was in an epistemological crisis that drove me to a kind of madness. And I at one point I went to my wife and I just said, tell me I'm really here. Like, just tell me I made it, that I'm here. And she said, yes, of course you're here. And we love you. And in my mind, I thought that's exactly what a hallucination would tell you, right? Like, to keep the hallucination going.
Yeah.
So it took a long time, a couple of years, to work through the anxiety and the derealization, the panic attacks, and eventually the depression, which is the last phase of this. It took a couple of years to work through all of that and sort of come out the other side relatively sane. One of the problems is I had a whole load of undealt with trauma from war reporting. So, if you've been traumatized and then you're traumatized again, you have to keep paying the whole debt all over again until you make good on the checks that you wrote.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So, Sebastian, have you come out of this? I know you're probably no closer to having, anything definitive you'd stand on about God or an afterlife. But do you feel your personal anxiety or beliefs or whatever you want to call it about dying and death are forever changed because of this, or are you still sort of where you were?
Well, I'm definitely still an atheist, and again, it all it means is that I don't believe in God,
Right.
and I don't believe in God because I've never seen any evidence there's a God, and so and I sort of leave it at that. But I will say the research that I did for my book, where it led to in terms of quantum physics and panpsychism and a universal consciousness. I mean, understand that in the quantum level, consciousness determines reality. So if you fire a photon at two slits in a steel plate and you don't watch it, it will go, the one photon will go through both slits at the same time. It will do the impossible. The photon is at all places at once at all times.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch it, if a conscious observer watches the photon with a photon detector, it's forced to pick one slit. And the conscious observation creates the quantum reality that you observe, right? So the idea that there's a universal consciousness and that the universe is a function of that, and that it suffuses the material universe the way, say, gravity does, it's just part of the physical makeup of the universe. That idea for me is there's something somewhat comforting in that we're all part of a universal entity. There's something kind of comforting in that. But I would say the most comforting thing, and my experience, by the way, was absolutely terrifying, right? Like I've never been terrified in combat the way I was. Even when the guy said he was going to execute me, I was not terrified the way I was with the pit. Like I was, it was absolutely awful. And but what did bring me some peace actually was my daughter. And at age 4 or 5 or something, I think I explained to her that our world is a sphere, and that there's a sun and there's night and day, whatever. I sort of explained the basics of our solar system to my daughter. And a few days later, she came up to me and she said, "Daddy, I know why there's night." I said, "Why?" She said, "It's so that other people can have day." And I thought about that and I realized, and that's why we die. Right? So other people can live. We can't all live forever. It will not work. Like in entropic terms, it won't work. In biological terms, it won't work. In ecological terms, it won't work. It will not work. Right. And it's not only our obligation, but in some ways it's our honor and our privilege to step aside so that our children can enjoy this beautiful world like we did. Mm-hmm. And if we don't step aside, they don't get to do that. No one gets to do that. And so when she put it like that in terms of night and day, and then I reframed it in terms of life and death, I'm like, okay, I'm doing it for them. This isn't a punishment. This isn't something being done to me. I'm doing this for them because we all need to do that. It's the ultimate act of love for our children and for other people. And so that, once I thought about it like that, I know it's not religion, but it gets me halfway there and I'm pretty okay with it.
I think that's beautiful, and it has helped me to determine that I'm not doing that for my kids.
I was just going to say,
I'm not doing that.
Screw them.
Absolutely.
I want to be a burden to my children.
What are they doing for me? I didn't get a birthday gift this year.
Like Albert Brooks said, his son drew him for his birthday a picture of his sports car. And he said, "You like it, Dad?" He said, "Would you like it if your birthday I draw a picture of a bicycle?" No. Sebastian, as an atheist, before we let you go, I'm curious. You have kids. Your daughter gets sick. I don't know if this has happened. One of your kids is going through something just awful. Do you find yourself praying to something? What do you do? I find myself...
Let me preface this by saying, nobody forbid. Or whatever forbid.
Yeah, right, but okay. You know what I'm saying? I find myself when something happens to my family, my kids, I'm making deals with whatever's up there that I didn't believe in the day before existed. And I'm saying, take me, please don't do this. How do you deal with that?
I mean, thank God, if I can use the word God.
Yep, you're allowed.
Thank God I've never been in that situation. But I will say that so I don't know how I'd react. I doubt I'd be talking to God. I mean, there's nothing worse, more venal than a a sudden change of heart when the chips are down, right? I mean, let's not insult God and embarrass ourselves by doing that. Like, oh, now you really need him. Okay, so you're on board. I mean, come on, like how to get struck by lightning, right? And so, I think I would be going through all kinds of contortions and making all kinds of deals, except it wouldn't be with an unearthly entity. It would be a dialogue with myself. I don't know what it would be, but
got it.
Yeah, but I do understand. Let me just say, now that I have children, I do understand the desire, the need to believe in heaven. And for most of human history, lots of children died. Children were always dying, right? 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3. I mean, infant mortality was enormous, and the emotional consequences for parents must have been horrific. And so I totally understand the idea that your precious child dies, and you want to envision that they're going to a heaven where they're going to be okay.
Right.
In fact, they'll be even better than they were here.
Right.
And that you're going to join them. Like, I totally get that. I totally get that idea, and why we do need an idea of heaven. But that's because we have children. Without children, I'm not sure I would have understood that human need.
So what is, at the end of the day, and at the end of your book, what is the, for lack of a better word, conclusion that you'd like a reader or an audience to take away?
Well, the conclusion I come to is that it's a reasonable idea to wonder if consciousness is not universal and that we're part of that. And when we die, we rejoin that sort of colossus of consciousness that is the entire universe. Like, that's a reasonable thought, right? But in a more sort of human level, I recount a story. When my dad grew up in Europe, and he was very old school. And when I was a teenager, I was out in the woods a lot. I was backpacking a lot. I was in the wilderness a lot. And he had never slept outside in his life. Right? He was an upper middle class European. And so I took him backpacking in New Hampshire in the late fall. And halfway up this mountain in bad weather, he got hypothermia. And there was no way out. I mean, there was no one out there. We were all alone. We couldn't get back to the road. I mean, it was a bad situation. He was not making sense. And I made a fire and I got him warmed up and I just watched over him as he fell asleep. And I made sure he was okay. I warmed up some soup and I saved him. And I just sat there the way parents look out for their children when they go to sleep. Our roles were reversed. It was as if I was the parent and he was the child. And I watched him go to sleep, made sure he was okay, and then I went to sleep. And I have this passage at the end of the book. I'm like, whatever religion, whatever, it doesn't matter. What we owe each other, what we all owe each other, is to look out for one another as we fall asleep. We do that for our children, and eventually our children will do that for us when we die. And their children will sit over them and look out for them when our children die, hopefully in old age. And that's just what we owe each other. And that is the core of humanity. It's the core of what it means to be human and to be loving, which is essentially the same thing. And if you want to believe in God, also go for it. As long as you understand that is your duty to your child, and then that will become their duty to you. And so it goes.
You're one of the most fascinating people, and your books, the current one, In My Time of Dying, How I Came Face to Face with the Idea of an Afterlife. Sorry that you had to do the research for that book. Sorry you had to go through that. But fascinating what you did to get there, the stuff you've done, the reporting you've done, the things that you've seen, and like you said, working through the PTSD. I hope you work through it, and I hope from here on in, you have an enjoyable life, and I love seeing you laugh. It feels good to see you laugh and have a sense of humor.
Yeah. Thank you. You guys are great. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I don't have to say fascinating. Cool guy. Here's the thing I want to ask you, though, because as he said, he didn't, his heart didn't stop. He didn't go over. Now, my understanding is You were gone once or twice in the early parts of your...
I think so.
But you didn't have an experience.
The only
like
horrible
this.
thing that happened that was a nightmare was when they took me in, and I didn't know this, they were doing exploratory to see what was going on. So they had a tube down my throat.
Yeah.
And I woke up while it was happening.
Yeah.
I was coming awake, but I couldn't see, couldn't move, and I could hear. And I heard them say,
He's waking up.
he's waking up. And I thought, oh my God, they're not going to know that I'm in here because I can't talk, I can't see, I'm choking. I didn't know there was a tube down my throat. Is this the rest of my life? So I did the cliched, I got to move my finger, I got to do something. And I did everything I could to move. That's when they said he's waking up because I could hear them. And the next 3 days later, I woke up in intensive
But you
care.
didn't have any kind of this experience. You had a living experience. You didn't have a
and
classic
again, I was in
near-death.
denial. It wasn't denial. I had no idea. It never processed that I was in trouble the entire time I was in intensive care. It just didn't compute until months later when I heard my wife talking about it.
Yeah.
That was that. But now we know definitively what happens when you die. You see Sebastian Junger's dad.
You do.
That's it. Everybody
very comforting.
Sebastian Junger. My dad, I was holding it. This was tough because my dad said he had stomach cancer, and he knew he was going, and he called me to come in because he said I'm going to stop everything and take morphine, so I'm going to be gone, but I want to say goodbye. So we're sitting there. My brother and I were holding hands, and he was out, but he was talking about going through old rooms and he was talking to people.
Yeah.
Going through rooms and talking to people that he knew.
Yeah.
Which was insane to watch.
Yeah.
And then we kept going, Dad, let go. And within an hour or two, it was
My
over.
dad, it was completely rational up through his last breath, calling the shots the whole way. 2 days before he passed, he very rationally said, I've been chatting with my mom. I've been chatting his dead mom. And he as casual as could be. And I said, you mean like in your imagination, Dad? He said, no, she's been here. And, and I remember, talk about the return to the cosmic consciousness. I remember being with my dad as he was taking his last breaths. And 3 breaths from the end, I'm looking at him. 2 breaths from the end, I'm looking at him. On his last breath, he inhaled, he exhaled, and I literally, my mom said she saw me do this. My head turned and followed something up to the ceiling, as if I was tracking him leaving. And that was really fascinating. I will tell you the one other thing that I can tell you from personal experience that would freak me out a little bit about this. The only out-of-body experience I've ever had, and I didn't think I was dying, I was on an acupuncture table, and the guy had put a fair number of needles in me. And when they do that, you kind of stay that way. You rest for about 15, 20 minutes and let the whatever happening do its work. So he left the room, and I'm lying there. Never shut my eyes. I wasn't falling asleep. I wasn't sleepy. But all of a sudden, what I saw was me on the table, as if I was looking through my eyes, but over me, and I started floating away from myself. And I freaked the hell out.
He was saying that could be.
And I went, no. And I forced myself back, my imagination, my dream state, whatever it want to be, my consciousness. I sort of scared myself into putting it back inside me. And then I made sure I was either talking out loud or moving something the whole time. I just did not want to lie still again. And it is the only place when I do get acupuncture, I continued to go, okay, just move a finger.
Maybe you don't get the acupuncture.
No, it's very, it's good for many things. But that feeling of floating away from myself was not like, oh, interesting,
this was
cool.
Scary
It was like,
the only
crap.
other time I had a near-death experience was when they got a bill from the Biltmore for 4 days stay. I almost died right in the lobby.
Yeah, a good thing you didn't, because they charge for removal.
The other thing is, and I said, I like to think there's something there, and I do make deals with God when my kids are sick. But I remember getting up, and there was a spiritual show on one day, And this guy's on, and he's saying, and I don't know why I'm doing the accent, but he goes, I was in the water for 3 days, and God, there were sharks, there was everything in the water, and God protected me for those 3 days. And I'm thinking, he blew you off the deck.
Right.
You know, like, how do you separate what, you know, both,
God put you in this
I'm
situation.
Sure both teams in the Super Bowl are praying to God, they're on the knee, they're praying to God, and God is going, I think the Redskins this time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we rationalize certain stuff,
You bet.
and there's a comfort in that. And I know, like I said, my kid gets sick.
That's why whenever an Academy Award winner gets up and says, I want to thank God, that's a tantamount to saying, God hates you for people.
You guys, nah, no. Walk down the aisle.
God likes me better.
Like in the room. No. Emmy.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I hate to say that. How many times were you up for an Emmy? Okay,
yeah, thank you for that one. Let's save me, David Guggenheim.
I went, nah.
God blessed me with you.
Kramer, I can see. I don't get that George character.
Hello, David. What did we learn? Did we miss anything? Did we learn anything? Where are we?
You didn't answer the primary question. What happens to you after death?
Well, I don't know. How could I answer
I'm in
it?
an urn on the mantle. That's a pretty good guess.
Oh, your kids like you.
There you go. Well, that actually got me thinking about what are some of the other things in life that you just can't know.
Okay.
All right. So what our hair looks like from the back.
By the way, we went from life
Sadly,
and death to
I
what
do
does your
know.
hair look like from the back. That's hilarious.
Jason,
hilarious.
I know exactly
That's
what my hair
hilarious.
looks
That's
like from the back.
The big questions in life.
You have to pay a price for that answer, but I live it.
We should put together the big book of questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to get deep with you.
Okay,
All
go
right.
ahead. You already started.
Yeah. What your mother-in-law really thinks of you.
Oh, sure. Why do you have to limit to the mother-in-law? I'm not sure what my wife thinks of me.
I'm not sure what Jason thinks of me. Go ahead.
And Jason, you might remember this one. What is on that chart that the doctors are writing and scribbling while you're there?
Oh, yeah.
in the hospital bed.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't come to the
Yeah, they always add a note. The nurse comes in, does all the
And
vitals.
it's too quick. It's like a BS and a bullshit
Yeah.
note, right?
Yeah.
They write it because they're obligated.
Yeah, there's something. Yeah,
Even if
there's
you
something
look
there.
at the paper, you can't tell when they
Yeah.
did it.
Still not good. Had a cheese sandwich.
Maybe. Well, that actually leads into the next one. What we smell like to other people.
Oh, that is true. We never know what we smell like to other people, regardless of the money I'm plunking down on my Chanel No. 5 or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. You get the snow. I walked by this woman the other day where I'm like, you know what? Whatever you're putting on, cut it by,
Yeah.
Well, but Jason's easy. Jason's easy because it's high karate all
It's a
the
good
time.
thing. It's
High
Dawn
karate.
Goldworm, remember our sniffologist? She would have. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just a couple more. When people put you on mute, are they peeing or just talking shit about you?
Both. It could be multitasking.
Yeah. Sure.
It could do, right. There you go. Okay, and the last thing, and then I hope more people embrace this, is that woman really pregnant?
Wow.
Oh, you went to the dark side.
You went to the dark side.
Yeah,
It's true.
No,
went
because
to
I'm
the dark
just
side.
saying.
No, I get it.
You have to be just you could just live with it.
Right,
Live
careful.
Yeah.
Careful.
Yeah.
And that woman who might be pregnant doesn't know what she looks like from behind either.
Yeah. Or what her hair's doing.
What her hair's doing, exactly. So, David, thank you. And thank you, everybody. What I'm glad is that we went from the depth of Sebastian Junger to really went deep on this
to
thing.
a cosmic consciousness to my hair from the back. Yeah, that's fantastic.
And what do I smell like?
No, yeah. Don't say we don't cover all the bases on Really
I
Not
smell
Really.
like a little bit like a lamb chop and some hedge, right?
No, actually, you have a very pleasant. Most
very
of the
much.
time, you're very pleasant.
And you have there's no negative or positive. You're kind of a neutral.
I'm a neutral.
I'm saying not a negative. There's no, you don't put, in our 30 years, I've never gone, boy, I can tell Jason's in the room.
I got to tell you, I walk around. I have breath freshener in my mouth in my pocket all the time because I feel like I don't have a savory breath. That's what I feel.
And I have a
like.
stick up, one of those Christmas trees in my pants. So just in case. Just same reason. Same reason.
Well, then, Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
All right.
Merry Christmas to all of you too on a
Thank
very
you.
special
Is this our Christmas episode? Yeah.
We mentioned it. We might as well make it a Christmas episode.
Hey, listen.
Death and Christmas.
Christ died. He went somewhere. Maybe we do too.
Here we
Okay.
go. Oh, we
Merry
die
Christmas.
every episode if you listen.
Take care, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.